As we get into the last 16 days of the British Columbia provincial election, we're seeing a significant shift with BC voters towards the Conservative Party and John Rusted. This isn't just the Main Street tracking poll I've been talking about over the last few days. This is every pollster shifting towards the BC Conservatives. And it's simply because people don't trust Premier David Eby and the BC NDP. For an example, I want to talk more about the numbers a bit later, but here's a taste of how good it's been for the Conservatives. The last poll Pollara put out about a week and a half ago showed the BC NDP up 3 points. As of yesterday, the Conservatives are up 3 points. That's a 6-point swing in a very short period of time. Usually week to week, you see 1 or 2 point shifts between the two parties that are mainly contending the election. You don't see a 6-point swing unless people are very much waking up to what the election's about and realizing that they cannot trust the BC NDP to change, because they're not going to change. Every significant policy shift the NDP has undertaken has all happened within the writ period, because it's just election promises that are trying to get them back into office, and there's not a significant chance they're actually going to follow through. If they cared about doing it, they would have done it before the election, not announce it right in the middle, and then pretend that you maybe didn't hear them say it later on if they happen to win again. And so before I get to the actual party top line polling, I want to talk about some other numbers that are demonstrating why David Eby is suffering so much in this election. Then I want to talk a little bit about the debate and other aspects about David Eby as a person that I think are turning off so many voters as they're being exposed more and more to him. The polls will show you that he actually has a positive approval rating and Rusted has a negative approval rating. In my mind, that really just demonstrates that a lot of moderate and even conservative voters will give the benefit of the doubt to Rusted, that he's probably a nice, not Rusted, but Eby, that he's probably a nice guy, but they don't think he's doing a good job. Whereas with Rusted, because there's so much negative media attention on him over oftentimes absolutely nothing, that you get every single NDPer and moderates thinking that, well, the correct answer is to say I don't like him, even though many of them plan to vote for him. But this is why the NDP are not doing well, despite Eby supposedly having some decent goodwill with certain voters. BC, those who say X is harder now than it was 2 years ago. Buying a house, 79% of people say it's harder than it was 2 years ago. Saving money for retirement, 75%. Paying for university and college, 59%. Finding a job, 54%. And that doesn't mean that on the flip side, people are saying it's gotten easier. It's probably that it's just stayed the same. And staying the same isn't exactly good when these problems were already big issues 2 years ago. They were frankly big issues 7 to 10 years ago. But who's counting anymore, I suppose. David Eby can keep pretending that this election's about personalities, that it's about whether or not you trust some of these conservative candidates because they tweeted something 4 years ago, or they made genuinely a silly statement during COVID about something. Nobody really cares about that. They care about the person who's going to lower their taxes, make it easier to build homes, that are going to make it so that we actually have new resource jobs opening up, approving mines, approving LNG pipelines. That's what they want. So the NDP can act as buttoned down and professional as possible, but they're still the people giving crack pipes to teenagers. They're still the people flooding the streets and safe supply drugs, attacking the police, not letting them do their jobs, increasing taxes, attacking the resource sector. They're those people. So they can think that this whole campaign is going to be about the crazy candidates the Conservatives are running. They're the crazy people in government. They're actually doing crazy things. So trying to accuse anyone else of it just makes you look more like a complete buffoon and hypocrite. A candidate might have said something ill-advised 3 years ago for the Conservatives, but it's the NDP who have actually been doing the ill-advised things. Regardless, I just want to sort of move into some of these video clips from the debate and from an interview David Eby did with a economic group. So this is from the radio debate that David Eby, John Rusted, and Sonia Furstenau, Sonia being the Green Party leader, did on a radio station with a bit of a film portion that you could watch online. And this was David Eby's big gambit, because I'm not trying to strawman the guy by taking his worst answer, his worst play during the debate. This was probably his best play. And the fact that in my mind, it falls so flat with voters is a big problem for Eby, because this is the best he had right here.
And John, I'm going to ask you this question. You have a candidate on the North Coast. His name is Chris Sankey. He's tweeting out that COVID vaccines cause AIDS. So do you agree with your candidates? Like, do you find that acceptable that your candidate would do that? How would you recruit? And I know, I just want to make sure that you know that this is a real thing. I'm going to pass you a copy of the tweet right there. And how do we recruit the doctors and nurses that we need? If you've got candidates out there that want to sit around the cabinet table, that want to represent their communities, they say that COVID vaccines cause AIDS.
Thank you. Open debate, John Rustad.
Thank you very much. Well, the first thing that we will do, of course, is make sure that we get rid of the mandates and the silly restrictions that have been put in so we can actually hire back our healthcare workers.
Well,
there are
already
close
done,
to 10,000 healthcare workers, and it's not done. The mandates that have been brought in place by David Eby, the strict restrictions we brought in will not bring back the healthcare workers. We also, quite frankly, need to get rid of Bill 36, which is extremely draconian on healthcare workers. And
I'm going to end it there. You can see it goes on for another couple of minutes. I will be linking that clip in the description below. But you can even just see John Rustad smoothly brush past David Eby. His attack on Chris Sankey is something that doesn't matter. Because guess what? Chris Sankey probably had retweeted or shared something during COVID in the middle of the height of frustration and how draconian the government had been working. It's also not good strategy for the NDP to be attacking a Indigenous candidate for not trusting the government on medical advice and mandates, considering that has not been a great history between the Canadian government and Indigenous people when it came to forced medical treatments and whatnot. So, and what you see right there is David Eby wants to make it a personality fight. Well, Chris Sankey said this. Chris Sankey did that. Nobody cares. Nobody actually gives a crap. It's that David Eby isn't even letting healthcare workers actually come back to work. Yeah, they got rid of the vaccine mandates, but they replaced it with a series of another dozen or so hoops that you have to jump through in order to return to work. And predictably, not a lot of nurses and doctors have returned to work who had been thrown out a couple of years ago. And so now we're in this, right now, BC voters are looking at John Rustad smoothly going past Eby's question, or his accusation, I guess, and looking at Eby as an unserious leader. He's the premier, and he's acting like some left-wing, smear artist, hit job guy. This is not professional. This is not premier-like. He looks desperate, and this is only highlighting the fact that David Eby doesn't have anything to say on policy. His policy sucks. His record sucks. And so he has to go after every single little thing he happened to not like that a conservative candidate said. But now I just want to quickly go over and jump into this next clip, because I think this one is quite telling about David Eby on policy. So he's at the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade, and as Cosman from, I think he's still at the True North right now, he says that David Eby basically starts squirming when he can't answer how he's going to end up paying for his $1 billion housing relief program when the province already has a $9 billion deficit. He just has no credibility on serious issues.
You made a pretty significant announcement around the tax cut for the average family, about $1,000 or so. And so we've done some of the costing. It looks to be about $1.5 billion. How do you intend to pay for that?
Yeah, it's about $1 billion. And
that was off by $500 million.
Yeah, no, it's a significant financial commitment. Right now, we're seeing that people are really struggling, and they need that additional support to get through. And what you'll see from us is steadily declining deficits and a return to balance. But we're not going to make people pay for that.
So where will that revenue come from if it's just over $1 billion then to make up for that?
Well, we'll continue to grow the economy to make sure that we're showing growth that increases overall financial support for the province, which enables us to do work like this. But also over time, as you see revenue come on from different initiatives that we're bringing forward around economic development, we're showing both declining deficits as well as a return to balance.
And let's be clear. They haven't been reducing the deficit. What David Eby is doing here is just a bait and switch of saying that, well, obviously we've been economically responsible. We can afford another $1 billion in the deficit because we've been shrinking the deficit. They haven't. They have projections saying that they'll shrink the deficit, but that's not actually shrinking the deficit. That's just saying in a theoretical world where you don't add a bunch of new spending, technically per capita, the deficit will start going down in terms of its size compared to the economy. No business owner, no person who's paying high tax rates are going to look at this and say, this guy's probably not going to slap me with a higher tax bill at the end of the year. They're probably not going to have municipalities greatly overestimate my property value so that they can tax me even harder. Nobody believes that this guy is going to somehow be financially responsible right after this election, like he's seen the light. He obviously has not. But now I want to move into some of the polling. The polling has gotten bad for David Eby, and this first one is actually not that bad for him. But again, it's all showing that that things are shifting in favor of the Conservatives. This was one of the weaker Main Street results, and it's still showing that the Green Party is actually coming up and maintaining a lot of their like support from 2020, which means that they're going to eat into a lot of the NDP's voters in the Greater Vancouver area. You get this one from Leger, 46 to 43 BC Conservatives to NDP. Polera here, 44 to 41 for the Conservatives. And let me tell you, in all of these polls, there are still a lot of people who are undecided, and they've been splitting, from what I see, 2 to 1 towards the BC Conservative Party. This is Main Street's new one from today, 43 to 41. But now I just want to go into some of the detailed results from this Main Street poll, because this is what should be terrifying to the BC NDP. The general theory, if you want to get reelected, is that you should be maintaining 80 to 95% of the voters that you had last election committed to voting for you this one. Do you know where the BC NDP are at? I want to get it bring up on screen for the shock reveal. 64%, 64.8% of Horgan NDP voters from 2020 are voting David Eby this election. And there's only 5.1% more undecided. So even if they ate up that entire undecided vote, it's not going to push them much over. There's not even going to get them past 70. My friend Chris from the Great Canadian Bagel podcast says lower 70s are already, you're dead. You're dead if you're in the lower 70s. Maybe you're thinking, well, maybe they can get some BC Liberals to vote for them. Well, the problem is the Conservatives are winning the BC Liberals harder than the BC NDP are winning their own 2020 voters. And the BC NDP are not even getting as many Liberals voting for them as there are NDP voters saying that they're going to be voting for Rusted and the BC Conservatives. This is just what death looks like. This is what electoral ballot box death looks like in polling statistics. 21.7% of Green voters are voting Conservative. Only 13.5% are going to go towards the NDP from 2020. Another party, that really doesn't matter. It's a small sample, so I was going to skip over that. But didn't remember, didn't vote. I guarantee this is mostly just didn't vote. I doubt there's that many people who truly don't remember who they voted for. There's still 27.2% of those people who are undecided. Makes sense. They didn't vote. They don't have strong loyalties. But already, including the undecided, more than half of them are going to be voting for the Conservative Party. Only 14.5% of people are going to be voting for the BC NDP. There's just no more basis of support for the NDP to draw out. They just have to hope that 100% of their base shows up and votes, because they don't got a lot left. And in a change election, it's very difficult to get the incumbent government's apathetic voter base to actually show up. And unlike Stephen Harper, David Eby doesn't even have a good economy to run on like Harper did in 2015. And Harper still lost. Harper still lost because they just didn't run a good election against Justin Trudeau, and Justin Trudeau captured that change narrative. Justin Trudeau is obviously a terrible politician and prime minister, but it shows you if you get the winds of change in your sails, it's hard to stop you, especially when you've sucked as the premier. And that is exactly what David Eby is. He's a terrible, sucky premier. And so him trying to go after the Conservatives on the attack, it just falls flat because he has no credibility. You can attack somebody if people think that you're good at the thing in terms of governing in this case. You're a good governor, you're a good premier, you're a good politician, you have good policy. So when you attack the other guys as having bad policy or bad candidates, people think that you might know what you're talking about. David Eby doesn't know what he's talking about because he's an unhinged radical leftist. I'm wondering what's going to happen on October 7th when you're probably going to have a bunch of Hamas crazies flooding the streets of Vancouver and Victoria, and the NDP are going to be too flat-footed to condemn those people because they need their votes. They need the radical anti-Semitic people's votes, so they're going to stay absolutely silent so that the Green Party doesn't absorb all them. Nuts what's going on right now, but it's just the state of affairs that David Eby has built himself. The Conservatives, I think that they're going to have way better turnout than even the polls are probably predicting, because I think the Conservatives are tapping into a sort of voter that hasn't probably not showed up in 2020. They probably didn't vote in 2017, 2013, 2009. They haven't voted for probably a decade, because who are you voting for, Liberals or the NDP? And although the Liberals used to be a big tent party the way Social Credit was, in the past 3 election cycles, they were mostly just a federal Liberal party for the province, just the provincial version of the feds. And now that there's a real conservative provincial party, all the models that are showing the Conservatives winning right now, like I even want to go check what the Main Street tracking poll shows in terms of its model. Yeah, they show the Conservatives winning 55 seats to 37 NDP with 1 for the Greens. I think that even that might be underselling the Conservatives right now, because there's a lot of federal Conservative voters who probably don't vote provincial, who will now vote provincial, and they're going to come out in significant numbers because they identify Rustad as a Poilievre ally. One of the biggest mistakes the media made early on, trying to cut the brakes from the Conservatives, is when Angela Isidoro and Anthony Koch, the manager of the Conservative campaign and the main spokesperson for the campaign, went after the far left publication, the Tyee, and of course the very liberal biased publication, or the CBC, who needs no introduction. They started attacking the Conservatives, the BC Conservatives, as just like Poilievre because they're attacking the media, which is ridiculous. They're pushing back on unfair questions. And I think they thought they were going to hurt the BC Conservatives with this coverage. Why do you think it would hurt the BC Conservatives to compare them to a very popular federal politician? The federal Conservatives poll as high as 53% in British Columbia, and you think the BC Conservatives don't want to be compared to the federal Conservatives? It's mind-boggling how bad the left is at running campaigns these days, or at least the leftist media is at influencing campaigns, because they've been playing on easy mode in provinces like British Columbia for so long, where no matter who won, they basically got what they wanted. That now that the Conservatives are a real oppositional force to the very corrupt Liberal and NDP establishment, that they're swinging wildly at them, hitting them with accusations and attacks that only make the BC Conservatives stronger and more popular. Anyways, that's it for me today, guys. If you live in BC, go help your local BC campaign. Every campaign needs more door knockers. Every campaign needs more signed people, needs phone callers. Go help them out if you actually want the BC Conservatives to win. I don't really think they even need exactly a lot of donations these days. They just need boots on the ground. Please be those boots if you can. If you're not living in BC, if you want to help support my show, go to the description below or the pinned comment where I have my legal fund pinned. Any amount of money helps, because we're fighting back against false defamation lawsuits that we got from somebody who still hasn't even filed any evidence to actually prove that we've defamed him, because we didn't. We literally referenced other reporting about the guy that was years old, but he didn't want to sue them because he was scared of them, but he thought he could try and bully me at the time because I was only 22 years old. I don't like bullies, so we've been fighting them in court, or at least through the legal process ever since, and we're almost up on the third year mark. That's it for me, guys. Have a good one.